Care and Services Scrutiny Panel. The meeting is being live streamed via the Council YouTube channel, and whilst members of the public can view the meeting, they were not able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As the meeting is being live streamed, I would like to remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this. Normal rules of procedure apply with any questions or comments directed through the chair. Please. My name is Dorothy Davison and I'm chair of this scrutiny panel. Could we start with agenda item number 1, which is apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Tom Marston and Jeanette Walker.
Thank you. Have we any declarations of interest today? I take that as a no. Then we'll go on to agenda item number 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Could I have these agreed, please?
Agreed, Chair. Councillor Halawi.
Thank you, Councillor Halawi. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you.
Seconded, sorry, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, thank you for that, everybody. Let's go on to agenda item number 4, developing a council-wide. We welcome other members from the Corporate Parenting Board, Chris Hobson, and also our Deputy Mayor and Executive for Children's Services, Mika Smiles. We also have in attendance Carolyn O'Neill, Improvement Advisor with the LGA, has been invited to attend today's meeting to speak to the panel about improving involvement and developing council-wide approach to children's services. And also, I believe that you're going to give us information on the SEND. Thank you. Can you start, please?
Thank you, Councillor Davison. Good afternoon, councillors. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Okay, so Jo's going to be my very able assistant and she's going to share some slides with you this afternoon. I don't intend to take a long time on the slides because there are some young people and their families who would like to share some information with you, which I think might be much more interesting than listening to me. So if you don't mind, Jo, we'll go to the first slide. Thank you.
No problem. I'll put them up now.
So that's the start. Thank you. Okay, lovely. So in children's services, I don't need to tell you as councillors that there are a number of acronyms floating around: EHCP, SEND, ESG, HNB, High Needs Block, Direct Schools Budget. Some of the acronyms that are particularly important to you in terms of thinking of the council-wide approach will be things like the continuing healthcare. So this is continuing care for children becomes continuing healthcare for adults, and this is the package for continuing care is the package for children under 18 with needs arising from disability, accident or illness. And those are if they have needs that can't be met by any other existing universal services, they need a specialist provision. Section 117 is free aftercare from the NHS and social care for anyone who's been in hospital under the Mental Health Act. Preparation for adulthood, those of you who are very, very involved with adult services and the transition from children to adults will be familiar with this term. And the special needs reforms in 2014 highlighted the need for preparing children with additional needs or vulnerabilities for adulthood as early as possible in their life. So we're not waiting till they're teenagers before we start thinking about what will their adult life be like. CAMS, clearly you will probably be familiar with this acronym as well, Child and Adult Mental Health Services. They are specialist national health services that offer assessment, diagnosis, treatment and support for children experiencing problems and with emotional, behavioural and mental health issues. Thank you, Jo. So who are the key partners that you will be engaged with as counsellors in Middlesbrough, but also that your children's services officers will need to deal with on a very regular basis? Well, clearly the clinical commissioning group, and we're about to see that all change into an ICS soon, so watch this space, but they are very, very important statutory key partners, as are the police. Those are partners that will help you to do your safeguarding, fulfil your safeguarding duties as a council, and that your officers will work extremely closely with. I've also mentioned schools and education, because clearly that is a universal service for all children, and is absolutely, they are vital partners to developing good children's services in Middlesbrough. Your general practitioners, the community and voluntary sector, hospital trust, mental health trust, they are all also key partners in terms of meeting the needs of your children, and the internal housing services within your council. Very, very important as children grow up, whether they're in, whether they're cared for children, whether they're moving into independent living, that there is good housing available. So that link between children's services and housing in the council is so crucial, that there is a sufficiency of placement for the children to live as they transition into adulthood, whether that be supported or independent living. Thank you, Jo. So here I've highlighted the need for very careful consideration about the preparation for adulthood. Now, your attention is with all children in Middlesbrough. However, some of your children have extra vulnerabilities, either because of their family needs or because they have additional needs themselves, such as special educational needs or disabilities. And that preparation for adulthood is absolutely key. I know from Jo that you want to take a whole council approach to preparing for children for adulthood. So I'm going to introduce you first to a young person. Well, I'm going to introduce you to both this young person and his dad. So you're going to meet Alistair, who's going to talk about the importance of employment. Now, the council is the family firm. Isn't it lovely if you can bring the children into the family firm, offer them internships or work experience or even employment? But if you can't, and it's perfectly understandable that jobs are scarce, what about engaging with other partners, other employers who may be able to help? So Alistair's dad's going to tell us a little bit about Alistair's securing work with Sage, and Alistair has Down syndrome. So he will tell you a little bit about their story. Thanks, Jo.
My son Alistair works at Sage. He got a job through the Recruitment service. Alistair wouldn't have been able to get a job through here without being supported. It's difficult for people with disabilities to show themselves in the best light unless we can get people to take a chance to show them what they can do.
Alistair applied through our application system. We were very impressed with Alistair and we offered him a work placement here, which he finished in January.
And Keith and Duffy and Blackman Food got and Duffy and Duffy.
Definitely doesn't mind getting involved in doing the same jobs as everybody else would. He's probably the most positive person in the whole business, and he doesn't mind doing hard work at all. He really enjoys it. There's definitely no difference between him and everybody else.
I don't think his disability is held back at all. I think he's thriving off of it, really, because we're giving him little jobs to do and he's getting really excited about having the responsibility and stuff. I think it's really making him who he is.
It's definitely helped Ed, and it shows that he can do the job fine, just the same as anybody else can. There shouldn't be any reason.
Being a part of the workforce is very valuable and very important.
get a new place and work.
It's very beneficial. I mean, it would be difficult for Alistair to get a job without people like Gates Employment Service, and they do a fantastic job to support people to get into work.
So thank you for listening to Alistair and his dad. But one of my questions would be, how is Middlesbrough Council seeking to secure employment for those young people who are facing disabilities or difficulties, learning difficulties? And if you can secure employment for those young people, then it's possibly going to be easier to secure employment for those without those special needs or disabilities. Secondly, I'd just like to share a little clip with you about the importance of friends, relationships and the community. For young people engaging with others, it's such an important part of everybody's life. And the worry is always for those people with additional needs that they become isolated from their communities. So this is just a question around how how you as councillors and Middlesbrough Council will support young people to maintain those friendships and take an active part in their community. Thanks, Joe.
We have services that are delivered from buildings for those with more complex needs. There are opportunities to take part in activities and learn independent living skills. We also offer specialist therapists and activities such as wheelchair dancing.
Thank you. So I know that you will have a range of activities going on in Middlesbrough to meet the needs of all children who are transitioning into adult services. And I guess it's just about how can partners support you to do that, because clearly councils can't do that on their own. There are very good community and voluntary sector organisations who can support with that. So just a question around how well does Middlesbrough Council engage with those partners, and how well do those partners indeed engage with the council to help you do that job, that very, very important job? Living accommodation is absolutely vital. As I've mentioned already, the links with your housing partners, whether they be private housing or social housing, very, very important. I'm going to introduce you now to Niall's mum. Niall is a young person who's moving from children's services into adult services. He has additional needs. Now he's a bit camera shy, so he didn't want to appear himself, but his mum said she would do the talking for them both. So if I can introduce you to Niall's mum, who's going to talk a bit about how scary it was really for her to take that step of allowing Niall to live independently, and how brilliantly he's doing. Thank you, Joe.
It was a definite no, because as a mum, my job was to protect my child, and I just didn't think that he would manage to do it. But in hindsight, that was probably more about me than it was about Niall's abilities, and not realising just what he could do. Not really. I did know another young person from going to disability youth clubs and things, and he'd got a property over in Recruitment, and that was at the other side of Gateshead to where we needed to be. And as a mum, I knew that I needed to have Niall near me and be within reach, where I could get to him within a few minutes, which is why this has worked out so perfect. Well, when you first asked me, again, the initial horror that my son was growing up and that this could be a possibility. But to be fair, I kind of talked about with my partner at the time and said, well, but what do we want for the future for Niall? And what is it that we need to think of more of the long term? And the fact that it was close, there was going to be the intercom system, concierge, and the support that was going to be there available for him, I thought was really important, and it impressed me. Just what he could do and what he could manage. What I didn't want to do was put him into a situation where because of what that would do to his self-esteem, and I really wanted, if he was going to do it, that I would know that it would work. Now, I'm absolutely blown away by him. I'm blown away by the flat and the building itself and the safety of it and how enclosed and secure he is. I'm blown away by him and his skills. Obviously we were meant to have an upskilling package in place with Prime, which because of COVID it didn't work out and people weren't able to come in. And bless him, he moved in and literally we locked the doors and he managed, and he learned how to use the hob via FaceTime, and he learned how to cook, how to clean, and I'd always get a phone call, now I'm going to FaceTime, and he just absolutely amazed us with what he could do. And I do think COVID could have gone either way, where it could have totally hampered him in his development, but actually Niall rose to that challenge and he absolutely has nailed it, and he's managed. I mean, once Prime were able to come in, there was just no point because he was actually able to do everything that they would have helped him to do. So he's managing to live here independently with very, very little care and support. Yeah, I think take a deep breath, maybe have a glass of wine, but definitely take a deep breath and think, not necessarily as a parent, but think about what is best for this young person, as well as it being your child, because your initial fears and worries, you need to kind of step aside of that and you have to start to think about the future, because you're not always going to be able to be here watching over them 24/7. And take those things and give them a chance to succeed.
So a very brave mum who took that step to agree to her son moving into independent living, which, you know, it is something that we all aspire for our children. So it is an expectation, and it's a proper and right expectation that yourselves as lead counsellors in Middlesbrough have the same ambition for all children. So there'll be a very careful programme for children who are cared for moving into their own accommodation or supported accommodation or staying put with their foster carers. But one of my questions today is about how will you continue to meet the needs of those young people who are preparing for adulthood? Because it is challenging and it's not an easy answer, I don't think, particularly to help parents become brave and take the step that Niall's mum took as well. You heard her say she was very anxious because she wanted to provide for him herself, but she recognised that she won't always be there for him. So the more we can plan for the independence of young people, the better, so we can support them on that journey. And talking of journeys, I'd also like to introduce you today to Jordan. Jordan attends a special school in Gateshead. We have a programme of travel training young people who attend special schools so that they can travel to school on their own. This country spends an inordinate amount of money transporting children with additional needs from their home to their place of learning, their school or their college. And I think most directors of children's services across the country, if not all, and elected members like yourselves would say it's a shame that that money goes to taxi firms and transport companies, bus companies, because it could be spent on the children's education if it wasn't necessary to spend it transporting them. So the more children we can train to travel independently, the better. Not just the money, though. most importantly for us all probably is the young people themselves, because it gives them a new lease of life and an independence. Teenagers want to go out, they want to go to McDonald's. I know it's not very healthy, but who cares? They want to meet up with their friends, so maybe want to go for a coffee or meet in the park. And if they can't travel independently, their life is very restricted to being taken by an adult or a trusted friend or relative. So I'm going to introduce you now to Jordan. If you listen out very carefully, Jordan's great claim to fame was that he told the bus driver he had taken the wrong route. So accomplished was he and travelling. So I'll let you listen to Jordan's story. Thanks, Joe.
I'm Jodie Sinclair. I go to Hilltop School. I think I was about 12, I think. I think somebody rang it up. Really good, and it was like a new chapter of being in life, more confidence of like crossing roads and stuff, and expertise on like the buses. Yeah, going to like new places and stuff. Probably to go with some of the friends, like getting a job and. Ooh, I think it was a couple of weeks into getting used to doing travel training and how to like put a hand out for the bus and how they like pay money and like use a bus pass. How to like ring the bell and be careful on like the public transport. It was getting on the bus and telling the bus driver you went the wrong way. He thought he was on the 58, but he was really on the 57. I think he might have been a new driver at the time.
So confident was Jordan travelling independently that he managed to tell the bus driver, who he thought might have been a new driver and didn't know the route very well, that he was on the route on the 57 instead of the 58 or vice versa. So that gives you a flavour of how important travel training and the independence of young people, how important that is to their lives, and it can definitely change their lives. Not all children will be able to travel independently, clearly, and we accept that. But for those who can and whose families are brave enough to go with it, it certainly does give young people a tremendous lease of life and an independence they wouldn't otherwise have. Okay, so can we move on to the next slide, Joe? I talk a lot about independence and, you know, very vulnerable children that you are most focused on do need opportunities. It's absolutely vital that councils and their wider partners seek to provide opportunities for children to live independently as they grow up. 3 children here with very different needs, but the clips are relatively short. The first one you're going to see is a young person who's in accommodation where he's supported by Billy, that's his carer, sitting next to him. And I will apologise, they nearly all got Christmas trees on them because we filmed them in December. So you're going to be Billy first and the young person that he supports, and then we'll move on to somebody who lives independently altogether, and then finally to a young person who has their own home. So I won't do any talking in between time. I do apologise. All sorts may sound like some sweet, some confectionery, but all sorts is it's a sort of work experience, independent opportunity for young people to get together. They create, make things out of wood, they sell them. It's a small enterprise which helps them to develop enough skills to enter the workplace eventually when they're confident enough. So I'll not talk in between them, but I'll just let Joe play these clips for you to give you an idea of the range of independent living that's available.
Hi, Mr. Dutton. This is my house, and I play football. You can go out. You can go out to shopping. You're gonna watch TV on the lounge, and you make dinner. We don't know. We have you get coffee tea in the kitchen. I'll always go out, be busy. And I was on the bus with my stuff. No more meeting. I got meeting my meeting, and I said I'm going to the bus. I'm going to the bus. Let's say I'm on the bus, and then I got a taxi, and I'm going to have a taxi to that, and just do the bus. To get to college.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Green. I live in England. I moved in since August because one of the family members, my little nephew, was doing my head in, jumping all out. It's very quiet, apart from the kids who left. That was with my hair now. I didn't even wash it in that. My mum always does that for me. Just kind of wax and that. Kind of Tesco's and that. They had divorce. And she stuff. That's all it. That's because of COVID. I'm trying to keep safe. When this is all over, I'm going to do something definitely. One of them swimming, one of the other ones going to the arcades, and the other one's playing pool. And my this is not because I like the water. I just relax in the water. Relaxing, doing your own stuff and that. It's good. Enjoy yourselves. Makes me feel grown up, I know.
Hello everyone, I'm Louise and I'm in my own home, and this is my dog Blue. Hello everyone. I have a good little team of support workers. They have made the right choices, and we have daily activity around him, like hoovering, taking my dog out, etc., etc. I'm independent living have been the best when I had a then because because we all have been together.
Thank you, Joe. So a range of different types of independent living, some supported, some with teams of carers, and some with just an individual carer who supports that young person to live independently. But I hope you get a sense of how it changes young people's lives, having that level of independence. And I do know that, you know, you're very, very, very focused on meeting the needs of children with additional difficulties, as well as those who are in the council's care and universal good services for everyone. But that connection with your health colleagues is absolutely vital to make sure that those needs are fully met, and also that there is housing available, good quality housing, appropriate housing that young people can access. And I think, I do know that you have the highest expectations for your young people in Middlesbrough. I'm always impressed by what I hear and my discussions with Sue about what's going on in Middlesbrough. I think those aspirations are absolutely to be applauded. They are all the right things that you're ambitious for your children, that they will move into work with economic development within the council, and all those partners and employers absolutely key to that. It's not always appropriate for young people to have full-time jobs, but small internships or tasters of jobs are really, really important to young people. It gives them a focus and raises their self-esteem tremendously. So thank you for that. I'm going to leave you with a few questions, Joe, if I may. So first question, how can you reassure yourselves about the effectiveness of the transition between children and adult services? How well do you know what happens in Middlesbrough? And it may be a new area of work for you. So, you know, it's just about asking the question. I don't think anybody would profess to be an absolute expert in all of this because it's such a complex field. So another question that you may wish to consider is the percentage of adults with learning difficulties or with care experience who live independently, and how many of those are in employment or internship or have had an experience, a work experience, and how does Middlesbrough compare with the national average? What's the trend over time telling us? And we do know that a lot of young people lost employment during COVID, because many were employed in the service industries or hospitality, and that's had a huge impact. But so, you know, don't worry if it's showing blips there. I think that's generally the case for most councils, but just knowing that is a good question to be asking and tracking it. So how effective are those relationships with your CCG and the police and schools and other partners? And how can you be assured that by working closely together with them, it's leading to better outcomes for your children? Are they being held to account just as you are as a council for those better outcomes? And finally, question 4 is around the links between children and adult services. I know in Middlesbrough you have a separate children's and adult service. That's not unusual. There are only 25 in the country that were a combined children and adult services. But how strong is that link between the two, and how well does housing feed into that to ensure that the needs of young people transitioning are fully met? So those are just some questions to leave you with. I don't expect you to answer them today, but maybe something you would like to think about and either come back to the LGA in future, or maybe just have a session yourselves internally. Thank you, Joe. Councillor Davison, I'm very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carolyn. That's the second time I've seen you give that fantastic presentation. Thank you so much today for coming to share it with everybody on our panel. Has anybody any questions? Councillor Nugent?
Yes, thank you, Dorothy, through the chair. I would like to say to Caroline, in my opinion, Middlesbrough really is a credit to the way young people with disabilities. I'm speaking with first-hand knowledge because my granddaughter is hearing impaired, and she is 19 now. She's still living at home with her parents, but her parents were concerned as to what would happen, what was she going to do. However, I do a lot of voluntary work local. So what I do, I take her with me, and her social skills have been amazing. She has also engaged in what you spoke about, the help through the buses and to learn to travel by herself. She has done that with Middlesbrough College. Now, I think Middlesbrough College is amazing. It is. And the deaf community in Middlesbrough have been fantastic while she was growing up. Absolutely fantastic. But she has now got a placement, a part-time placement, working in a garden centre, and she just loves it. So, yeah, you know, there's opportunities there, and people are willing to work with young people, you know, providing people push it and engage in it.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent. It was nice to hear that.
Dorothy, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else would like to ask any questions before we go on to the next bit? Councillor Hobson?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really, mainly to say that I worked in special schools for many, many years, and there's nothing better than to go out into town and see one of the pupils out there. They've got themselves into town, they've got themselves a little bit of money in the pocket, and they're even going into a pub and buying themselves a meal. And for me, that is just absolutely brilliant. And the other thing is, I do know quite a lot of the children that I worked with in special school who have gone on to independent living and absolutely doing a massive job on what they can do themselves, which the parents, as we saw in that video, the parents were so worried to let them go and live independently. And yet we find that when you just give them that little opportunity, they can just come out of themselves. They can actually show you another side of themselves. They're just absolutely brilliant. And we need to have that faith. And you're right, we do need to give them the opportunities. We need to give them the housing. But I know that we are working on that. But I cannot say how important it is that these students that go out there and be able to get the bus and just go into town, it is such a big thing to them. So yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I did enjoy it, and we welcome anything that can help us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hobson. Is there anybody else? No, thank you very much for. Oh, sorry, Councillor Halawi. Sorry.
Okay.
I've just seen your hand come up.
That's fine, no worries. I just want to say, Caroline, I think that's a very uplifting presentation, and it's very humbling as well. And I think it gives us lots of food for thought. I think it's quite right that you should raise the 4 questions there at the end. And I would hope that we as a panel, not today, but at a future meeting, could examine some of the answers that we can have to those questions. And I think those questions are pertinent not only to know at one point in time, but to have regular updates about figures and what's happening. And I think it's important for us all to know all of that. So I'm sure Sue and her team, without giving anyone any more work, except I probably am. But I think that's really powerful that we have the answers to those questions, that we're very well informed and that we know exactly what's going on in our authority. So I would certainly welcome your suggestion and hope the rest of the panel agrees that it would be really important for us to look at the answers to those questions at a future meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sure we can do that, Councillor Halawi, along with Sue's expertise. Thank you. Is there anybody else? No, thank you very much. You now want to present SEND to us.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Davison. Can I just say thank you to Councillors Nugent, Hobson and Halawi for those comments, because I think it just reflects the really strong ambition in Middlesbrough for children and young people. And, you know, it's so heartwarming to hear the good things that are going on regularly in Middlesbrough. And, you know, I'm very passionate about children with additional needs. So I think it's lovely to hear such good things are going on. So thank you, and well done to everybody who's involved in that work, because it's vital. So Councillor Davison, if Joe would be so kind, I'm just going to rattle through an update on the SEND review, because obviously we're all awaiting eagerly before the end of March, and we're rapidly approaching that. That's going on in terms of the SEND review nationally. So we can have the next slide, please, Joe. So you'll know that the big change came and the reforms were in the Children and Families Act in 2014, which was introduced in September of that year. There was a strong feeling that there were the right reforms, because it focused very much on families telling their story only once and not having to repeat it over and over again to education, health, you know, benefits, organisations. However, it might have been at the wrong time. That's just a question to pose, really. It felt right that it was about preparing young people with additional needs for adulthood, but was the timing right? And there was a question around whether it was adequately funded. So we've seen a year-on-year increase. Every council has seen that across the country. I know you're no different in Middlesbrough. A year-on-year increase in the demand for education, health and care plans. It hasn't been accompanied by that increase in funding. Health partners, I did mention earlier on, continuing care funding. Are all partners contributing equally? Is that a fair distribution of the burden, or is it falling more heavily to the council than you would like? And again, it's a question to be raised. There is a decreasing level of inclusion in mainstream schools as lots of parents chase the EHCP. They see it as a way of securing better provision for their children and young people. That isn't necessarily always the case. So how is the money used? And I mentioned earlier in the first presentation, I mentioned the amount of money that goes on homeschool transport and things of that nature, and also a significant amount of money in the special needs sector is spent on tribunals, very, very expensive, and ultimately, who do they benefit? They're probably lawyers and things, a lot of money going in that direction rather than to meet the needs of the children. So that's the current situation. Joe, if we can move to the next slide, please. That just exemplifies the increase in demand for education, health and care plans. Some of you may remember them being called statements. Children with an additional need or a special need had a statement, and that would recommend perhaps a school or a college. It would name a school or a college or a provision for them. And now that changed since 2014 to an education, health and care plan. And the demand is so significant, as you can see from that graph. If we could move to the next slide, Joe, please. So SEND is a major funding challenge for all councils. There are many councils in the country in significant deficits because of the high needs block. So another acronym there, high needs block of the DSG, the Direct Schools Grant, is the money for the children with SEND. And in the country, a 970 million total deficit. That's approximate, and it's ever increasing. The DFE has listened, so they're putting 2.5 billion between 2021 and 22-23 into the high needs block. And this is for funding for special school places, but we haven't got the detail on that yet. It's just a headline. There is also what they call a safety valve project, and that's to support councils with the biggest DSG deficits as a percentage of their entire DSG. And there are some in the country with very, very significant deficits. That safety valve will help them with their funding, so it doesn't appear on the council's balance sheet. There's a statutory override there, and that will due to end in March 23. So we've got another year of that statutory override. Thank you, Jill. So the SEND review was announced in September 2019, aiming to do all those things under the bullet points there, not least increased mainstream inclusion of young people so that their needs can be met within the communities and they're not always transported to specialist provision around the area. Aligning incentives and accountabilities. You will know that the Ofsted framework judges schools on their outcomes. There is a debate around whether that framework has moved away from recognising schools that are very good at including children with additional needs, and that accountability, that framework and how that measures how successful they are. So there needs to be some clarity around why the demand for education healthcare plans continues, and a debate around what is the best use of the money. Is it best used by putting more money into mainstream so that the needs of children, where they can be met in mainstream, where they live in the communities and go to school with their friends and neighbours, would that be better for them than being in segregated specialist provisions? Notwithstanding, there will always be a need for specialist provision for those children who most need it. Thank you, Jill. So the direction of travel. So COVID sort of reset that 2019 ambition. COVID got in the way of everything, fair to say. So that's been delayed, and it was reset in September 21. We know that we're going to see the change very, very soon. We'll have a headline around what the Green Paper will say to us. What are the likely themes? Again, it's likely to be around greater inclusion of children with special educational needs in mainstream provisions rather than always looking for a specialist school placement. And that will be properly resourced so that the children are perhaps taught in smaller groups. Their needs are met in different ways. If they have autism conditions, then they will be in low stimulus environments, but within a mainstream school. So different ways of meeting their needs. Also, removing that sort of postcode lottery, that there will be more of an entitlement wherever children go to school. So those are the likely themes and a review of funding. Thank you, Jo. So the local government has been lobbying. They're asking for clear accountability. Councils are the system leaders, and councils can work with partners to get the best outcomes for all children in a geographical area, and to avoid creating incentives to attract, select or exclude certain groups, a much more graduated approach to meeting the needs of children with special needs. Councils have that legal responsibility to promote the well-being of all local children, and are therefore ideally placed to lead local SEND systems, and that's what the LGA has been lobbying for. And to hold all education and health partners to account for the support that they provide to children and young people with additional needs. While we know that all partners will be working hard to provide effective and timely support, councils, as the accountable body, will need to backstop powers and levers to ensure that funding and support is delivered where it's needed. So decisions over the use of all relevant funding must be taken jointly by those responsible. Currently, schools, councils, CCGs, which will become ICSs, very important. Possible models include co-commissioning by the three sectors across perhaps a community or geography to be agreed, but it must cover all the children covered by the relevant schools catchment, and that could be managed through a single board, but needs to include enough schools to ensure that they can be adequately represented and to commit to decisions. The review must seek to reduce the reliance on and the use of tribunals, as well as ensuring that where tribunals are used, judges take account of the public purse. There is a strong view at the moment that there's an awful lot of money being hemorrhaged out of the system in relation to tribunals, which are expensive. Some councils have developed or are using independent mediation, and I guess you're in that position in Middlesbrough as well, to reduce the use of tribunals. And the LGA would like to see all areas use such an approach and involve people with relevant expertise and experience, such as maybe ex-SEND officers or ex-SEND special school teachers or leaders, health reps, parents with experience of the system, to take part in those in that mediation to avoid the need for tribunals. And finally, a statutory override that's in place, as I mentioned it in the earlier slide, means that the dedicated school grants deficit sits between individual councils and the Department for Education. It's not on the council's balance sheet. I think that's a bit of a few for many councils, that it isn't on the balance sheet. However, some councils are really concerned nationally that they will not be able to set budgets for the year 23-24 if these DSG deficits return to the balance sheets. So it will have a major impact for the whole council funding. And we've asked, the LGA has asked ministers to encourage those who make decisions about that allocation of funding to think very, very carefully about how these deficits will be managed in the longer term. We're very keen to work with the department to develop a really comprehensive set of proposals to eliminate or write off high needs block deficits. Whether that can or will happen, we don't know yet, but that's certainly something that the LGA is lobbying for. Clearly, there's a need to link with the care review and the education white paper, because these things can't sit in silos. You've got to knit it all together as a council. Therefore, it's important that reforms that are introduced are manageable and complement the new white paper for education and the care review. So that concludes the whistle-stop tour of changes to the SEND review. And I'm happy to take any questions, Councillor Davison.
Thank you very much for that. A definite insight into what's happening. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions? Councillor Halawi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Caroline, for that. Just picking up on your last point about the finance and the situation for 23-24. And you said that the LGA are pressurising or asking ministers for clarification. I mean, obviously, it's key that this situation is dealt with and that the responsibility does not fall heavily on already very overstretched councils. So how could we, as a council, support the LGA in putting pressure on ministers to clarify and clarify soon, because it's not that far away actually in terms of budgets, the project of 23-24. The other thing I was going to say was I think it's important that we look at mainstream provision, because given the increasing numbers we have right across the patch in primary and secondary schools, it doesn't make real sense to be sending children off, except where they absolutely need to specialist provision when their local secondary school possibly could provide units for specialisms or share them out. But of course, that's going to mean massive investment as well, and even capital investment potentially because of space. I think that my worry, and it's based on discussions we had this morning, is that some of these academies are not always accountable, and yet we councils are accountable, but we're not getting responses through partnerships of the accountability from all of the academies and trusts, and I think that's a big worry. So I would like Ofsted to put more pressure on the academies to focus on SEND provision and other such issues, especially when issuing grades for schools, because if they don't take clear account of children with SEND additional difficulties, then I think they ought to be held to account for that. I just would like to know, do we know that academies are spending an appropriate proportion of their funding in provision for SEND pupils? And, you know, how can we have more clout to ensure that they're doing their fair share of the work? That's the academies, because I think the councils are doing their fair share.
So thank you for that question, Councillor Halawi. I think it's a really good question to ask. Obviously, there are conversations with the Regional Schools Commissioner in the region, who is responsible for those academies locally. But I do think that the partnerships, the individual partnerships, are vital here, and everybody playing their part. I think most multi-academy trusts would absolutely concur that they want to do a really good job for children with special educational needs and disabilities. And Sue will know a lot more than me about how that's manifesting in Middlesbrough. But I think your question is a very good one. And how do we continue to lobby and ask for adequate funding and that the needs of these children are well met? I think the regulator, Ofsted, has a role to play there, and certainly they're recognising that. The Association of Directors of Children's Services are also lobbying very hard, as are your finance directors, together across the region and across the country, pushing very hard for this to be recognised. So I think we'll see more in the education white paper about this, but it is certainly something that through your Director of Finance and potentially your local MPs, that continual lobbying will be very helpful. It's very much on the radar of regional schools commissioners and the DFE that there is a need to address it. So I think it's a very, very valid question that you ask.
Thank you, and thank you for your answer, Caroline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sue, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Would it be helpful if I gave you just a couple of sentences of a Middlesbrough context?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Caroline mentioned the pressure on the number of EHCPs, the demand for assessments for education, health and care plans, demand for assessments in terms of education, health and care. So education, health and care plans has gone through the roof in Middlesbrough. It is extremely high at the moment and is growing. We have had to bring in extra staff to be able to cope with demand. So that's been, and I think we mentioned that this morning at Education Scrutiny. So that's really putting a lot of pressure on the service. I chair the the strategic board. The board is quite strong. I think it is growing in strength, but it is also going to, having to oversee some of the pressures. We don't qualify, as it were, for, maybe thankfully for the safety valve programme. We are, however, part of the Delivering Best Value programme, which sits underneath the safety valve programme. We do have a budget deficit in terms of spending on SEND, but we are not on the absolute naughty step, as it were. We are going to be offered, and I think that's offered in inverted commas, a financial advisor to support us with our SEND spending. We had a meeting recently with colleagues from the Department of Education, attended by the Chief Exec and our Director of Finance, so they are well cited on those issues. And I think the other thing I would say is that thankfully we have a low number of tribunals that have been in our authority. There hasn't been one since I started as Director of Children's Services, so that's over 2.5 years. So I'm very, very pleased about that, because they can become, as Caroline has said, quite adversarial and very, very challenging. So that's just a sort of 2 or 3 sentences in terms of an update as to where we are in Middlesbrough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can I ask you to come in now, Councillor Hobson?
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment again, actually, Councillor Halawi did say a few things that I was thinking about saying, but one of my things is that mainstream school, we need to get as many special needs children into mainstream schools as we possibly can. Not only does it help the special needs children, but it also shows the other children in the school about special needs, and it helps them to understand what special needs are. And when you go into a mainstream school and you can see the special needs come together and the mainstream children understanding that there are problems there and helping the children with the problems, that to me is just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful thing to see mainstream children go out of the way to help other children that need that little bit of extra help. Is just a really, really good thing. So yes, we need as many of them into mainstream as we possibly can. And like you said, Caroline, it isn't possible to get everybody in. There are a lot of children with very special needs that are never ever going to get into a mainstream situation. But we do need to keep pushing on this and getting as many in as we can. But to do that, we do need the finance behind us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'd like to move on now, and I'd like to thank Caroline for coming today and giving us these presentations. We'll take on board the questions and we'll study these questions and answers to these questions in our committee. So thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay till the rest of the meeting if you would like to, but I'm quite sure that you have other things on your agenda at the moment.
I do. Thank you so much, Councillor Davison. It's been lovely to meet everyone this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for joining us as well, Councillor McCabe. I didn't get the chance before to welcome you. Right, we'll move on now to agenda item number 5, which is an update children's services improvement. And I do believe Sue's going to give us this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid my presentation isn't quite as whizzy, as it were, as Caroline's was, but I'm sure you'll bear with me. Jo, are you able to share it, please? Children that they matter, and I hope that comes through everything that we say, and what we've spoken about today is actually making sure that Middlesbrough children matter and that they thrive and reach their absolute potential and what support we can give them to get there. So the next slide, please, Jo. So a quick overview of what happened in the last monitoring visit. I know that some of you will have seen this before, so apologies for that, but I have updated it. So we had our second monitoring visit, which was our third visit from Ofsted since the full inspection that we had in 2019. And there were 2 inspectors. There was 2 weeks of preparation and lots of liaison with inspectors, and they were with us for 2 days, albeit virtually. And the focus of that monitoring visit was children in need and children in need of protection and the public law outline. The public law outline is work before we get to the door of the court. So how can we support families to avoid care proceedings or when they're... And the letter was published on the 31st of January. I know that you've all had copies of the letter as part of the pack for this meeting. So, so we'll just go relatively quickly through the results. So the next slide then. So the strengths: no child was at risk of immediate harm or in need of urgent action. I mean, that was, that is a really biggie. If we go back to the inspection in 2019, it was, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was much more than 10. I think it was something like 15 children were seen to be at risk. We dealt with those risks and we dealt with them very quickly, but nonetheless, a significant reason why we were inadequate. They found that senior managers know the services well, and we've got a realistic understanding of our progress. We know where we are. I'm sure you've heard me say before that, again, referring back to the original inspection, we didn't know ourselves. We didn't know that we were inadequate. We didn't know how inadequate we were. We've worked hard to improve the capacity of staff, decreasing caseloads and employing more permanent, qualified and experienced staff. If I had a magic wand, and I think my most keep awake moment at night is recruitment and retention of staff, particularly recruitment. We have at the moment a £5,000 welcome aboard payment out there, and it is having very limited effect. It is drawing 1 or 2 people towards us, but not many. It is an issue, varying different local authorities across the country. But certainly we have more agency staff than we would like to. What we would like to have. That is absolutely not saying that they're not valued and valuable and that practice isn't great, but it is not where we need to be, because we know that. And I certainly had this experience in another authority where I said to the inspector, come on, we've got good agency staff who've been with us for quite a long period of time. And he said to me, but they could walk out on Monday week, Sue, and just go. And you be, however many members of staff down. And that's the challenge of having agency staffing. One of the reasons we know where we are is that auditing is strong. And what we've been doing really over the last 2 years, one of the things we've been really focusing on is compliance. Are we doing the right thing at the right time? And that leads on to the next slide, please, Jo. But we haven't been focusing on compliance at the expense of quality. We've had increased training and increased learning opportunities. So we feel that we have been focusing on quality, but the main thing is, are we doing the right things? Now, the next point on this is some examples of good practice. And I've put the some in inverted commas. It's a bit of an Ofsted word. They say some. And where there was stronger practice, that we have stronger practice where there are immediate safeguarding concerns and where children are on the edge of care. But also some of our strong examples of good practice are where plans were good and where we were making smart plans for children and we were carrying out the tasks in a timely way. And really, it's really great to have heard from the inspectors that social workers know their children well, and they've got an enthusiasm and a passion for improving children's lives. And what more can you want from a social worker, really? They felt supported during lockdowns, and they can see how children's services has been improving and that they're feeling better supported to do their work. So I take that. I'm incredibly proud of those last 3 bullet points. Moving on to areas for development. Now, we still have a stubborn 20% of inadequate practice. Well, certainly we did at the time that this report was, this letter was written. It's gone down a bit, well, it's gone down quite significantly in some areas of our practice. In some areas, I think it's down as low as sort of now as 10%. But actually, we need to get to 5% to be an authority that is to be assessed as good. All of our early help work is assessed as requires improvement or better. So you can see how it differs across the children's services. As I've mentioned, plans and planning need to be more focused. We've also had insufficient focus on the lived experience of the child. So by that, what I mean is we might go in and look at an issue for a certain family, but do we really think about what life is like for that child on a day-to-day basis? You know, so are they getting up to a cold house? You know, do they not have the right clothes to wear? Are they hungry when they go to school? All those sorts of things. So not just the immediate presenting issue, but what's around, what's life like for that child? What if, you know, what is it? If we walk a mile in somebody's moccasins, what will we see? So social work tools are not sufficiently used to focus on patterns of behaviour and cumulative risk. Sometimes we look at things in isolation. I think that sort of goes back to the last point that I've just said. You know, we look at an issue that comes in and what we're not looking at is, this happened last week or this happened last year. What does that mean? And are we using the appropriate tools to try and identify that? And in the main, supervision, that's one-to-ones with social workers, are not sufficiently driving improvements. Yes, supervisions are happening. Yes, they're happening regularly. And yes, we are yes, we are looking at casework and supporting social workers, but they're not yet driving improvements in practice. Moving on. We've got positive steps to improve our pre-proceedings work. That's the PLO work that I just mentioned. But again, management oversight doesn't always identify what needs to change. I think we're saying, okay, families, you need to get better. You need to get better before we go into, otherwise we'll have to go into court. But we're not really explicitly telling families what needs to get better. So they really need, and they really need to know what to focus on. I probably would take a little bit of issue with evidence of a risk-averse culture, which is the next point there. So some families are finding themselves subject to statutory child protection planning when not needed. And that's, and particularly the criticism was when parents are actually cooperating with you, Sue Butcher, they're working with you as hard as they possibly can, but their children are still at risk. Why are you putting them on child protection plans? Because what more can the parents do? They're really cooperating, and I get that. However, the inspectors built this on only 2 cases, on only 2 children, and I wonder, my view is that sufficient enough evidence? But I would agree with the next point when we've closed a couple of cases where safety plans are still in place. So why would we close work with a child when there's still a safety plan in place? Is that right? Are we being a bit over cautious there? So that's something that really we have been looking at over the last couple of months. Thank you, Jo. So next steps. Sorry, that's a bit fuzzy, folks, but I'll take you through it. So we've revised our improvement plan and our focus is quality, quality, quality. And we were fortunate enough to gain some grant funding from the Department of Education. We had £330,000. And we've used that money to bring in some support from experienced practice leads. All of these practice leads are passionate about practice, and various practice leads have different passions. So, for example, one passion of one particular practice lead is children with disabilities, and the work that she's been doing to support our practice with that has been pretty amazing. And so we've already been notified of our next monitoring visit, which is actually next week. So you can see how the cycle of monitoring visits is pretty relentless. We've just got through one. We've just had the letter. We've just updated our improvement plan. We're just starting to work on that. When along comes another improvement, another monitoring visit. So this one's focusing on court work. So we've got to the door of the court with the last monitoring visit. Now they're taking us into court work. Children and young people who've been looked after for about a year, and permanence. And I'm sure that you know that's my absolute passion about moving children to their forever homes in as timely a way as we possibly can. And again, that was something that Ofsted absolutely slated us for in the last full inspection. Children were left, I think the phrase is, languishing in care rather than being in their forever homes. Also, we have an annual engagement meeting with Ofsted. So we have a monitoring visit in March, we have a meeting with them in April, and then we will have another monitoring visit in June. So you can see that the scrutiny from our regulator is pretty relentless. Yes, it's necessary. It keeps us on our toes, but it does mean that we are spending a lot of time preparing and engaging with Ofsted. We are working hard to join up more and better with our partners, and we are preparing for something that's called a JTI, which is a joint targeted area inspection. And that's where Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission and the regulators of the police and indeed the fire brigade all come together to look at a particular authority. Now, we don't expect one of those in the immediate future because we've got the improvement program going on, but we have to prepare for these things, and actually it enhances our partnership working. As I've said, the next monitoring visit is after this one that's coming in next week, will be in June. So when will the full inspection be? When will we be subject to what they call a judgment inspection? So when Ofsted said they'll start talking to us in September, the next monitoring visit will be after June. But it's a bit of a balance, councillors. Do we, if we wait a couple more months, will that mean that we tip into good? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Or do we get it happening more swiftly so we get off the inadequate naughty step? I think that's going to be a continual conversation and something that we need to think about, because absolutely I want to come out of this improvement journey, or this phase of our improvement journey, with the best possible result, which means the best possible improvements in outcomes for our children. Joe, I think that's the last slide. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Sue. Do we have any questions for Sue? Oh, Sue, there's no questions.
Oh, Councillor Udin is
Oh,
leapt in.
yes, Councillor Udin, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much, Sue. That was brilliant, actually. Obviously, so, shows, we're working really well. Only one thing I wanted to check as well, in terms of the incentive, a fair £5,000, yeah, to start with. Is there any reason you said, it's only very limited people taking it out? Is there some conditions they're quite not keen on, or is there something in it? Have we ever looked into it? Why do people not coming forward?
It's not been in place for that long, but I had hoped for a quicker response. You're absolutely right. It's early-ish days, but I had expected more reaction. I think it's generally the shortage of social workers, particularly, and this is for experienced social workers. I should have said that. It's not for our more newly qualified colleagues, who of course are very, very, very able, but aren't able to take the more complex work. Limited success. I think that's about, it is a regional and national issue. The only condition that we've put on it is if you leave within the year, you have to pay a proportion back, which I think is entirely fair. And then after that time, we do have a retention allowance, which people then, so they don't immediately drop money. There's a retention allowance which they can go into. That's more successful in that if people, and it's a 3-year retention program. So people, do tend to stay. And I don't have the exact figures in my head, but that is more, that is better. But yeah, it's not being as profitable as perhaps we anticipated. But on the other hand, I think given the climate, it's where we are.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Okay, thanks anyway. Thank you very much. Just
Thank
wondered.
you.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, it's in the theme of what Councillor Uddins just said, Chair. It's in comparison. I remember when the first inspection come in, and we were having trouble retaining staff because of the low pay we were offering. Now it's a great incentive to give somebody £5,000, and you know I think it's a good idea. But at the end of the day, it's the basic pay. Are we, in comparison to our partners around in the Tees Valley, are we too low or are they paying too much? You know, and this was brought up in one of the meet. I clearly remember this being a problem with the other director. Can you give us any insight on that, so please?
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. My understanding, I don't have the figures in my head, but I think we can provide them to you quite easily. We are not the lowest in the region, is my understanding, but certainly we, and I'm talking with a sort of slight caveat because I don't have it all in my head, but we certainly are not the highest in the region either. I think that's one reason why we put the recruitment and then the retention allowance in. You're right, it's not the basic pay, but it is one way of sort of moving around and presenting Middlesbrough as a place that's, you know, an employer of choice. So that's not a very good answer. I do apologise, but I can get you the figures. I don't think that we are completely out of kilter, but of course, if we offer an incentive, other authorities will offer an incentive as well. You know, there is something of a, what is it, you know, racing to the bottom or racing to the top. Another authority will offer, you know, or put out, something that attracts people to and from. I mean, the other thing for me is putting Middlesbrough on the map, and it's something I'm quite passionate about because I do want people to see that, you know, that we are an improving authority, because at the moment we still have this rather ghastly, you know, inadequate tag. And why would you, if you've got the choice of, you know, 12 authorities in the region, particularly want to go to an authority that's still badged as inadequate, which is one reason for, you know, improving our practice and just showing people that we are a great place to be and a great place to work.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Higgins?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like, first of all, to say a big thank you to all the staff for all the hard work they're doing. And we know that we have improved vastly. And I'd like to thank you, Sue, for that presentation, because you tell it how it is. We never got that before. And you know, you say the good points and the bad points. I was devastated, absolutely devastated when we got that first Ofsted report, because, you know, everybody knows why. But I like coming to these meetings, so because we get to know what's happening, what's good, what's improved, what needs more improvement, and I think it's brilliant. And so thank you to you and all your staff for all you're doing. And we will get out of that horrible phrase, and we will get good, because, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Chair. Just a bit of a daft one, really. I think we've got the same sort of incentive with adult social care. Was it 29 social workers short in adult social care? And we've got the same sort of bonus for over a 3-year period. Keep trying to keep it 3 year. And I do believe, as Councillor McCabe says there, I think we are short on the salaries in comparison to Redcar and Cleveland. So I think, you know, you've got a fair point on that one. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Higgins, did you want to come back in? Your hand's still up. You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, if you don't mind, Chair. I mean, it's great. We'd all like to improve the hourly rate for everybody, but we can't, for the simple reason that we'd have to give an upgrade to everybody because of the way wages go. You go on your grade, And it'd be great if we could give everybody an increase. I would be the first one to say yes, but sometimes you can't, and you've got to go by the rules, unfortunately. So I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Hobson?
Thank you, Chair. I just think that really Sue hit the nail on the head by saying that do people want to come to us at the moment because we were inadequate? And until we actually get that good, I don't think people will start to come, because I think people will be so unsure as to which direction we're going in. We know that we're making good progress right through, and we know that, you know, we're going to get there, we're going to get the good. But people on the outside who are looking in thinking, well, do I really want to apply for this job? They've just had inadequate. No, I don't think I do, because, you know, the caseloads were high and this was wrong and that was wrong. And I think that will have put them off totally. But I think once we've climbed that ladder, Sue, I think we will have people knocking on our door saying, yes, you have made such a good job of things that you are going in the right direction. We want to come and join you. So I think it will change. But at the moment, I think until we get up that ladder, I think people will be thinking, do I really, really want to go somewhere that's been classed as inadequate? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Could I just ask you a question, Sue, with regards to your presentation, really?
Of course.
It was slide 6, areas of development. Still 20% inadequate practice where concerns are not addressed and work is not progressing appropriately. What's being done to address this? Which areas are of concern?
Okay. So again, it varies across the different directorates. What we do, one of the main thing that we do is auditing. So what we do is we audit cases. So that can be a themed audit, like, so for example, looking at visits, and we actually had a themed audit around education, health and care plans. So we will audit and we will look at sometimes specifically by social workers, sometimes by trends, and we will use the results of those audits to inform training. So then we will put on training and development. Can be, you know, as simple as one of the practice leads that we've got now sitting alongside a social worker and saying, hey, up, you know, don't you think it would be better if you did X, Y, Z? Or it can be a training course that's saying, you know, this is not what we're not quite doing right in Middlesbrough Children's Services. So that's how we shift it. Now we have shifted it to some extent. We still have more shifting to do. And I'm seeing some areas where it's, you know, greatly improved. But that's generally the sort of cycle of improvement. We also need to, as part of that, improve the sort of supervision element, because that also, you know, improves practice. So that's generally how we get to. We need to use learning. We need to use the learning from audits, learning from complaints, learning from compliments sometimes, learning from, you know, from comments that, you know, that you bring through scrutiny, because that's what you're helping us do. You're helping us improve our practice, improving through the corporate parenting board as well, because, you know, that's a great reflection on, you know, what we need to do as what needs to happen as through corporate parenting. So that's generally how we do that. But it is, I'm very proud of my social workers. They are working their socks off. And if you think about the scrutiny that they are all under consistently, and also, you know, that's hard for social workers to come into as well, you know, in terms of, you know, why again would you come to a local authority where Ofsted pop up every 3 months? You know, it's hard work. And just sort of going back a step really to what Councillor Higgins is saying, transparency is everything. I hope transparency is my middle name. You need to know it. You know, I think you need to know exactly where we are. You know, in the presentation, it said senior managers, senior leaders know where we are and what we've got to do. And that includes, you know, absolutely, totally includes you as members. you know, particularly chairs of Scrutiny and the chair of the Corporate Parenting Board, you need to know, you need to know where we are and what you're doing. So it's absolutely right that you have that transparency from me, so you know it too. So that's where we are. But thank you. It's a really good question.
Thank you for that. So thank you for that information, and thank you and your staff for everything you do. Definitely. Councillor Chris Hobson, did you want to come back in?
No, I didn't, Chair. I left my hand up and I just saw it.
All right. Okay.
Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment or ask a question? Just thank you so much, Sue, for that today, and thank everybody for all the hard work they're doing.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, we go on to the next agenda item, which is the OSB update for the 22nd of February. The OSB considered the following at the meeting on the 22nd: Executive Forward Working Plan, Executive Member Council Hill, Executive Member for Culture and Communities and previous Executive Member for Education gave his report. Chief Executive update, Scrutiny Panel's Chairs update, Revenue and Capital Budget projected outturn as at quarter 3 21-22, Corporate Performance update quarter 3 21-22, and the next OSB meeting is on Wednesday, the 23rd of March at 10 a.m. Is there any other items that anybody would like to bring up today under any other business? No, thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance today and our guests for coming today. And thank you, Sue, and thank everybody for attendance. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night. And the next meeting's the 26th of April. Sorry, forgot to tell.